Hi, I'm Leah, and I'm the author of the Webtoon Canvas comic Beneath the Camphor Tree, and welcome to part 2 of this series where I show you how I utilize content from Acon3D to make webtoons easier. In the first part of this series, I showed how I use SketchUp and Clip Studio Paint to make easy and fast background images for my webtoon and webcomics. In today's video, I'll be focusing on characters and props. First of all, I want to thank Acon3D for collaborating with me in this video series. If you missed it in the first video, Acon3D is a great webtoon and artist resource known globally by webtoon creators around the world as having lots of high-quality premium assets that allow for making webtoons easier, faster, and better. In the last video, I focused more on 3D backgrounds, but I wanted to take a moment to show the cool assets Acon3D has for props and detailing brushes. If you use Clip Studio Paint, you're in luck. Acon3D has tons of assets that are geared towards or exclusively for using with Clip Studio Paint, and a fair amount for Procreate users too. There are two methods that I use to not only match the perspective of the background image, but also to make drawing characters faster and easier. One method is to use a 3D model, such as the character models native within Clip Studio Paint, and the other is to draw an undersketch of the character by hand. The third secret way I often use is to do a hybrid of the two, using the new Clip Studio Paint head models for close-up shots, but doing a rough undersketch for the rest of the body. If the models native to Clip Studio Paint are not what you are looking for, Acon3D has a great number of character model assets available in their store. I won't be going into too much detail on how to draw an undersketch or how to use 3D models in this video. However, I will be going over some very important perspective tips to give the illusion of your characters existing within the perspective of the background image, and that tip is using ellipses in perspective. Once you identify where the approximate horizon line is in your background image, which you can figure out by looking at the image as a whole and determining where lines converge, you can add either an undersketch or a 3D model in the general perspective and pose that you're looking for. Now it's time to add detail and flesh out the characters. Some webtoon artists skip straight into the inking stage at this point, while I and many others do a detailed pencil sketch first before going into inks. It's all about preference and how comfortable you are with the final drawing. Here's a quick non-comprehensive overview. When drawing characters in perspective, it's important to keep in mind how ellipses work in relation to the horizon line. When an ellipse is drawn close to the horizon line, it'll look more like a single line. The farther above or below the horizon line it is, it'll look more like a circle. With the horizon line in mind, when drawing curves on your characters, such as their eyes, their face, and especially their clothing lines, it's important to keep in mind where these areas are in relation to the horizon line and draw the curves, aka the ellipses, in accordance with that. Another thing to keep in mind is using lines to create form. When drawing an arm, for example, if the arm is pointed away from the viewer, the lines defining the upper arm will relate to the line defining the lower arm differently than if the arm is pointing toward the viewer. Another tip I use a lot to speed up the process is using 3D props, most of which I get from either the Clip Studio Paint asset store or through Acon3D. Two ways to use 3D props is to either extract the lines and flats using the Extract Line Art tool and the flats by removing the line art and flattening the image, or by tracing over the 3D prop and merely using it as a guide. I use both these methods depending on how much I want the 3D prop to blend in with the character. If it's something like a weapon or a tool the character will physically interact with, I'll often trace over the 3D prop so it matches the drawing of the character. But if it's, say, a piece of furniture or something like that, I'll use the first method that I mentioned. When adding details to really flesh out the characters, using custom brushes or visual assets can make the process super helpful and speedy. While with an illustration, I might have the time to sit down and draw all the clothing decorative elements or logos or freckles by hand, it's important that I don't waste unnecessary time on making webtoon panels when I'll be drawing the same character or elements over and over and over again. This is why Acon3D has personally helped me so much over the years, as well as the Clip Studio Paint asset store. They have a whole library of brushes and assets to help detailing characters easier and in pretty much all the genres you could need. A quick tip for using custom assets, whether made by yourself or acquired through a site like Acon3D, is to register them as a material and put them in a folder you can easily access. This way you can quickly grab it without having to open another document every time you want to use that asset. I use this for clothing embellishments, but also things like freckles for characters that have freckles and I don't feel like drawing them every single time. Finally, it is time to make sure the character looks like they belong within the scene. I do this by adding shading and color adjustments. Usually I use a multiply layer that I fill the whole character with a color that matches, at least to the best of my visual ability, the background image. It does not have to be perfect, however, and usually I use the same basic colors to give consistency to my panels throughout my comic. Then I add a shading layer, add some shadows, highlights, the eye reflections, all of which really flesh out the characters and add life to them. And those are my main tips for creating characters that match or belong in 3D backgrounds for webtoons. Please comment below if you have any questions, don't forget to like and subscribe, don't forget to check out Acon3D's amazing asset library via the links in the description, and thank you for watching.